You're listening to episode 269 of The Secular Buddhist. Welcome to The Secular Buddhist. I'm Ted Meissner. The Secular Buddhist is the official podcast of the Secular Buddhist Association, a grassroots-driven effort to answer the needs of secular teaching and practice for contemporary society. The podcast has interviews and roundtable discussions pertaining to engaged Buddhist training and practice, and the SBA website has show notes for each episode along with resource materials. Though the podcast focuses on core practices from a secular viewpoint, more traditional teachings are welcome and openly discussed. Jeff Eisenberg joins us to speak about his upcoming book, Fighting Buddha, a story of martial arts, Buddhism, kicking ass, and saving it. Hi, everyone. Before we begin today's episode, I would like to mention that this podcast and the supporting website, discussion forums, our live online practice circle, and other services provided by the Secular Buddhist Association are supported by you. If you find this episode or any other offerings helpful to you in some way, I ask that you take a moment and visit secularbuddhism.org and click on the contributions button. There are many ways you can help, which are listed on that page, and if you make a donation, it's tax-deductible and helps ensure the SBA is able to continue the exploration of secular Buddhism. Thank you. We're glad to have you join us in the conversation. We may have an impression of Buddhism and Buddhists as peace-loving pacifists. Nothing wrong with that. Many of us might fit into that description. But Buddhism also has an association with fighting, martial arts, and the two disciplines can help inform and help one another. Jeff Eisenberg was born in Irvington, New Jersey in 1964. He started training in the martial arts as a child and has been training consistently for over 45 years. He is a Grand Master level martial arts instructor with over 30 years of teaching experience and ran his own dojo for almost 15 years. Always priding himself on being a student, he has repeatedly taken off his black belt to put on a white belt and pursue training in a new style. This has taken him on an extensive journey through the martial arts of judo, karate, muay thai, kali, eskrima, hapkido, aikido, and Japanese jiu-jitsu. His current martial arts pursuit is Brazilian jiu-jitsu, in which he's been training for the last 8 years. He's also a certified protection specialist and defensive tactics instructor, and has worked as a bodyguard and investigator. He was first introduced to meditation through his martial arts training, and this introduction began his lifelong interest in mental discipline and Eastern philosophy, particularly Buddhism, which he has been practicing for most of his adult life. He currently lives with his wife Linda and a bunch of cats across the street from the beach at the Jersey Shore. So sit back, relax, and have a nice dark oolong tea. Our guest today is Jeff Eisenberg. Jeff, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me.
Very glad to be having this conversation, as you're one of the, I'd say, minority of folks that I've spoken with who came to Buddhism through the martial arts. So I really want to give a chance to talk about that and that shared experience. But let's start by having you tell us about your background.
I was drawn to, I don't want to say Buddhism, but Eastern art and the image of Buddha, because my mom was a painter and she painted images of Buddha in her paintings. We had a Buddha in the garden, and a lot of the decorative things in the house were Eastern flavor. It's kind of one of those moments where you're drawn to something and you don't know why. And that, I guess, intrinsic interest in all things Eastern brought me into martial arts. All the neighborhood kids were playing Little League, and I had no interest in that. So this was like 1970-ish, so there wasn't a martial arts dojo on every corner like there is today. And my mom happened to find a judo dojo a few towns away, and that was my introduction into martial arts. And that came through a few things. One, as a kid, I was addicted to the Kung Fu TV show and Saturday afternoon Kung Fu movies, and then finally into the Bruce Lee movies. But interesting enough, coming full circle, what I was drawn to most, especially in the Kung Fu TV show, was that the moments between Master Po and Kane as a boy, and the Dokusan or private interview kind of thing where they talk philosophy. So going into a judo school at 7 years old, it kind of was like a fantasy come true for me. All of a sudden I had the cool outfit, and there was an Asian master who wasn't so soft and compassionate, but actually screaming at me in a language I couldn't understand. And but from the get go, every martial art training I've been involved in each class started with a meditative session and ended with a meditative session. And now I can look back and say, wow, we were practicing mindfulness and concentration. And it's kind of interesting how it's come full circle, and there's this dialogue between mindfulness practitioners and what I call fundamentalist Buddhists.
Yeah, and we'll want to come back to that in a little bit. One of the things that you said stood out for me is that you began and ended training sessions with contemplative practice, which I've not typically found in the much fewer places that I've been to, really in just one tradition. But you have a bit of an eclectic background. So before we really unpack that, I'm just wondering, how consistent was it that you found a meditative practice included in training in the different places that you went to?
Actually, I would say most often or more often than not. Now, when I say a meditative session, I'm not talking a half an hour sitting. It might be 5 minutes at the beginning and end of class. And then during class, there was a lot of direction of applying your focus and your concentration, and being grounded in the physicality of what you were doing. So at that point, it was more about a concentration exercise, and it was the end of that means was really to be effective in your technique application. And that was really the only goal of that.
So what prompted you to write a book about these two related interests you have, the Buddhism on one side and martial arts on another?
Well, having always been drawn to having an Eastern interest in everything from music to art to martial arts, it just evolved into philosophy, and I started doing a lot of reading. And I grew up as a mixed breed in terms of religious upbringing. I have a Eastern European Jewish side, and I have an Italian Catholic side. And I really wasn't raised strictly on any side of that line. But one moment that was really a catalyst for me being more interested in a philosophy I could take action in was my dad got extremely ill when I was, I guess, about 12. And up to that point, we'd been celebrating Christmas every year with the works, huge Christmas tree, presents, the whole bit. And he decided he was going to get very Jewish because he was afraid for his health and his life. And I understand that. But suddenly we were told we couldn't have Christmas anymore. And that was just kind of jarring to me. And I kind of didn't know where I fit in because I had some of the Jewish side of things, people telling me, actually kids kind of teasing me, telling me, well, if you're not coming from this pure bloodline from your mom. You're not really. So he basically said, look, you got to quit this club, join this club. And then the new club didn't want me or didn't say it really met the requirements. So it really pushed me in a direction away from anything organized. The interesting thing is my Buddhist journey or meditative journey has paralleled my martial arts journey in a lot of ways. And that was surprising to me and kind of the catalyst that got me writing this book. I always wrote out of pure enjoyment, but somehow over the course of time, it gelled into this. It was a long process. It wasn't something I sat down to do. It just kind of evolved into it. But with the eclectic martial arts that as you categorized it, I spent a lot of time in very traditional martial arts. And back then, as I'm sure you must have experienced a bit, there was kind of an attitude that the Asian instructors coming over knew best, and we trusted them and had faith in how we were being taught and what we were being taught. And there was a high level of loyalty and dedication required, and it was very rigid. And after a while, I realized I wasn't meeting my particular goals that I had in martial arts, which was first and foremost to be able to realistically protect myself and have an applicable skill set. And the irony is back then it was considered quite an accomplishment to become a master of one art. And now, 40 some odd years later, it's actually looked at as a liability to just be a master of one art. So it's been a neat evolution. But basically, my goal was to protect myself, defend myself. And the other goals of martial arts, such as a mindfulness activity and fitness, the preservation of, let's say, artistic, historical, cultural activities or aspects of a culture. I mean, those are all great goals, and I have them as well. But my primary goal, which in my opinion should be, I think, the primary goal of someone in martial arts, is to at least develop a usable skill set. Not that I'm advocating having to use it or wanting to use it, but to train in something and not really acquire the skills in it just never made sense to me. And so to accomplish that goal, I had to start training with different instructors in different styles, traditions to get what I felt was well-rounded skill set. And the thing is, back in the day when you did that, if your main instructor found out you were doing that, you could get kicked out of the dojo and blacklisted. And it was really kind of ridiculous at the time. So what I did was I would go to workshops and seminars, take private lessons, and do all this to train with different teachers in different styles. So fast forward to Buddhism, I was actually kind of surprised to find that same kind of experience. Our tradition is best. This is the way you must practice. And I right off the bat, based on my martial arts experience, started going around and studying with different teachers and different traditions. And that's kind of how I have my eclectic Buddhist practice today is I've really only committed to one teacher for any length of time. So for me, my practice is more about what I do in my daily life, moment to moment, than it's pragmatic for me, not dogmatic.
Yeah, it's interesting when you mentioned the parallels between your martial arts practice and Buddhism, what that was going to look like, and seeing that there was this an adherence to this is the one true whichever was not serving you well. It wasn't quite meeting your needs, and that there was I'm going to explore a little bit more. I'm going to question maybe more than is typically accepted. And I'm curious within your practice and your exploration of Buddhist traditions, what you found that resonated with you most, wherever it was. What touched you? What spoke to you with that?
Well, it's interesting to me that really from the get-go, when I started really pursuing a Buddhist practice, was that I heard all the time, even the Buddha quoted, be a light unto yourself. Don't take my word for it. Find out for yourself. All these things that I actually loved hearing, which was people more experienced in the practice kind of preaching this, go out and carve your own path, find your own way. And then almost the moment you start doing that, there's this rallying against it. and I found a lot of those kind of ironies in dealing with certain aspects of Buddhist practice. I think what really resonated with me right off the bat is any Buddhist teacher that talked about how you could take whatever you were doing in the controlled environment of a zendo and how it could be applied. And that really was where I was coming from, because in martial arts, most people are shocked when I tell them that most martial arts are actually useless for protecting yourself. Some of that is because the material really isn't applicable to reality, but more often than not, it's just that it's not trained to develop a realistic application. So for me, and this is not, I don't want to be misunderstood to say that training and study and practice is not important. It's paramount, but I needed to be very honest with myself. Was it the right vehicle to meet the goal I was trying to achieve? So for self-defense, doing a choreographed routine with a willing partner who was helping me, that might be good in a drilling sense to learn certain mechanics, but it wasn't going to develop a realistic application. And to me, that translated in Buddhist practice to, while sitting on a cushion is very important for me. I do it daily. Is whatever I can experience on the cushion, is that dependent on a controlled environment, or can I take it out and somehow turn it into application in a situation that is the least conducive for it? So really, any teacher that was teaching along that mindset is who appealed to me. The other side of it was observing how that teacher put it into application. And I actually have a chapter in the book called When Good Teachers Go Bad. It kind of addresses some of the things I've been through and witnessed. And
that we've had podcast episodes on in the past about teachers behaving badly.
And as a human being, as just another guy on the path trying to do my best, is just doing a bit better than my worst could be. One thing I stress is I'm not a Buddhist teacher. I'm a long-term practitioner, and I fail. We all fail. But in the martial arts and in Buddhism, I really do think there's should be a somewhat higher standard for someone that's putting themselves out there. And I'll leave it at that.
So I'm curious about how the Buddhist practice has affected your training in the martial arts. So what is it in Buddhism? How is that manifested in the dojo?
I think it kind of goes in reverse for me, where Buddhism has kind of identified and clarified or explained an experience I've had in martial arts for years and years and years, but never could articulate really what that experience was. So as my Buddhist knowledge, insight, whatever you want to call it, grew, I could kind of go back into it. It just made me go back into training and be able to really, really understand what I was experiencing that I never could really articulate. And then once I knew that what I was doing could really be a meditative practice to support what I was learning in Buddhism, it really just became more than just a physical training. It really became a mindfulness practice. And the thing, that might not sound so new or revealing to longer term Buddhists, but the thing that I'm talking about is not, let's say, a soft art done slowly in a conducive setting, just like sitting on a cushion might be. And I'm not saying those things are not useful. They're very useful. But I'm talking about, doing a reality-based martial art where you're actually engaging in a fight where nothing's planned. You're just going in there trying to execute your technique against someone resisting. To me, I always like to see that my mindfulness practice is working. In other words, can I apply it? Can I cultivate it in the most chaotic, overwhelming, painful situations? And I think that the answer to that is no. And I'll clarify that. Actually, for me, the answer is yes, but I say no because it has to be adapted. So when you go into a live jujitsu match, the technique that you might do so well drilling, the only way to learn how to apply it is to learn to go against the resistance and learn how to adapt it. And then to realize that just because you were able to adapt it and apply it that one fight, the next fight, the scenario, the conditions are different. And there could be a million different applications based on changing conditions. And just like mindfulness practice or in my daily life, I find that same experience. So I hope I'm articulating that well, but what I like to say is, when I'm on the mat and some guy's on my back with his arm around my neck trying to choke me out, to be able to be mindful and present and calm is to me showing me that it's working, but it's testing my mindfulness in a situation where it's not conducive for it. But that's the time we need to be able to have it. When it's challenged the most is when we need to be able to utilize it. So I actually, in that scenario with someone, trying to choke me in a jujitsu match, I'm actually there on the mat with my eyes closed, following my breath. I'm not getting swept away in the narrative in my head of what I'm thinking about it or what I'm adding to it. And it's really, really a meditative practice for me, which a lot of the meditation community is really pushing back against me about.
Yeah, I wonder if that's a good segue for us. One of the things I heard from you is that this is what applies in one situation might not apply in the next, that there's a uniqueness of each complex moment. And in your subtitle, you have it as a story of martial arts, not the story, but a story of martial arts Buddhism, kicking ass and saving it. I wonder if you could unpack that a little bit for us.
Well, with the martial arts tie into the Buddhist practice, kicking ass was me having fun with words. It was wordplay, but in the book, it's really pertaining to kicking adversity's ass, kicking our own habitual conditioning's ass, and in terms of that, we're saving it. So I don't want people to think that I think practice is a fight, but I do. Many times it's very, very difficult to go against that grain, go against that habitual reactivity that's so ingrained. So it was a word play on that. And as I mentioned before we started, the book cover was done at a certain point, and the book was nowhere near publication. And I just started social media posting, trying to get a little grassroots buzz going and it's some interest, and immediately got emails and messages from people. Most were pleasant, but some were, all caps with a million exclamation points. How dare you use the word fighting next to the word Buddha? How could you put those two words together? You don't understand Buddhism at all. How could you?
How's that mindfulness practice working for them, I wonder?
I actually, and I've been setting up martial arts seminars to help support the publication, and I had a seminar that I scheduled with the general manager of a meditation yoga center, and she was all on board and excited about it. And a week later, she calls me and she says, "Oh, I'm sorry, the owners of the center pulled the plug." And I said, "Really? Why?" And she said, they don't want to be associated with anything called fighting Buddha. And, I said, can I talk to them? Can I explain it? It's really just a play on words that kind of works in my use of humor and things. So anyway, I was really surprised, but really what shocked me the most is having spent years and years and years of Buddhist people and teachers in particular drilling into me that constructs and ideas and concepts and labels, we need them to function, but, we shouldn't be too attached to them, and really, we should be pursuing experience, not the constructs around experience. And how they were always saying to, challenge your deeply held beliefs. And if experience it proves a Buddhist teaching wrong, then, the teaching needs to change or abandon it. And I had all this stuff which really appealed to me. And then when all these messages started coming in and the pushback started just over a few words, I was like, wow, like the attachment to these words was just, it really actually shocked me. It really surprised me. Here I was, first time author. I'm like, I hope this book, somebody likes it. And all of a sudden, nobody read it yet. They're against it. So
Yeah, we've had similar experiences with just the use of the word secular in the title of this podcast and for association, that there was a lot of pushback against that without even initially asking, hi, so this is standing out for me. It's asking for some notice, and I'm wondering if we could maybe talk about it, or if I could ask some questions about it. But it never would go that way. It tended to go towards I don't like that, or that's wrong, or any number of things. And it sounds like that's something similar to what you were running into just by using some words in a title.
Yeah, it's, I mean, to me, it goes against everything that people that are trying to, be skillful and take the philosophy that we've learned through Buddhism and put it into actions. So it just went completely contradictory to everything I expected out of a Buddhist community. It's really shocking. But I mean, I actually have a chapter in the book that's called Cause No Harm, the Nonviolence of Violence. I wasn't angry at this. I was just actually shocked, like left speechless, like, wow, all these people are just so upset with me over these words. But I think everyone reacts out of their own story and their own pain and trauma. And I think, like you had said earlier about people being drawn into Buddhism because they're suffering or they're looking, for healing or whatever their motive might be. I think a lot of people carry a lot of baggage in that realm. So I kind of talk in the chapter about my understanding of defining violence and defining a use of force against violence. And so I'm hoping that maybe clarify. I hope people can get past their initial reaction to read it and maybe get a different view of what I'm trying to talk about.
Well, and there's an important distinction here, is that unlike a book that's about the heartwood of Buddhism or about meditation or any of that, this also has one leg hip deep in the martial arts realm, and that this also honors that portion of what's contained here. So it's not all going to be the light beauty of the Heart Sutra or something like that. There's also going to be topics around martial arts, and that in kicking that's part of it.
Well, I think martial arts that are synonymous with spiritual or Buddhist practice, there's a couple of them that are really sought out by Buddhists that want to do a physical activity. And, part of their attraction, one, something like Tai Chi is very soft. It is a meditative exercise. It doesn't involve any kind of interaction really or contact, at least at first, with anybody else. And the other is Aikido, which I've actually trained in extensively, and it is a real foundation of everything I do. Tai Chi conceptually does have some things that could be useful in self-defense, but it's never trained to turn it into application. And Aikido, which has a phenomenal amount of useful technique, the same thing. It's not utilized. It's not trained to be utilized. And then I've always been kind of confused with this. And on one level, I understand that you'll hear in martial arts a lot, the highest level of attainment is not to use it. And I absolutely agree with that. I'm not looking to go out there. And actually, this is important because until you've been in a real altercation, whether it's on the street, in a professional capacity, which is really more my story in terms of professional, and on the mat with live fighting, you get humble real quick because number one, you just, wow, you realize there's a lot of tough people out there, and you don't want to mess with them, and you don't want to go. It's like a veteran coming home and saying, why are you advocating war? I never want to be involved in that again. It was horrible. So I think people that are pushing back a bit, and even Buddhist martial artists are pushing back as well, because there's this idea that I've been experienced in Buddhism where, certain things are labeled meditative and appropriate for meditation, and certain things aren't. And the things that are generally internal, soft, done very slow and methodically. And that's important. That's definitely a part of creating a foundation for mindfulness. But then anything that doesn't fit that mold in some kind of perspective or definition of what's considered traditional is automatically discounted. And, now what I call American Buddhism, we see punk rock and skateboarding and rock climbing and running and bicycling. And now I hope I'm pushing the boundary a little bit more with, mixed martial arts and reality-based martial arts. So I think some people think anything of an aggressive physical nature is somehow not meditative. And if someone has experienced violence, I think that definitely tempers how they view anything that could be conceived as violence. So it really, for me, these weren't things I really thought about until I would have conversations with people and they would tell me these things. So I think it's interesting what people how their perspective is being drawn out by maybe what I write or what I say.
Well, for folks who want to find out more, you can go to fightingbuddhadojo.com, and that's linked on the episode page for this episode. And of course, the book is there on the episode page as well. Our guest today, Jeff Eisenberg. Jeff, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like to hear more about something you've heard in today's podcast, please come visit the SBA website at secularbuddhism.org, and you'll find an entire webpage devoted to this and every episode. Discussion about this episode can be found on the episode page itself, along with show notes. Sound editing, mixing, and mastering provided by the generosity of Anthony Dominello of StructureFromSound.com. The music for The Secular Buddhist is used by permission from John Kaizen Neptune's CD, Steps in Time. Additional music is provided courtesy of Monty Levinson of Taihei Shakuhachi and Rodrigo Rodriguez. Their websites are linked on the SBA site on the About Podcast Music page. Until next time, remember, every moment you have a choice. Make it the best you can. See you next time on The Secular Buddhist.